So I am going to open the meeting, the May meeting of the Maine Recovery Council, and welcome all of the council members as well as those here in the room and those listening in. I would like to start off with just people introducing themselves before we move on to the agenda, and I'll start with those on Zoom. Betsy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Betsy Fitzgerald, representing the litigating subdivisions and sitting in semi-sunny Washington County.
There you go. Amber.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amber Pulsifer. I am an individual in long-term recovery. I am also a clinician at an MAT clinic in Presque Isle.
Thank you. Maggie.
Hello, everyone. I am Maggie McLaughlin. I'm Director of Health and Human Services for the City of Portland, representing litigating subdivisions.
Brendan.
Hi, Brendan O'Neill with the Attorney General's Office.
Liz.
Hi, Liz Blackwell-Moore. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Cumberland County Public Health.
Deb.
I'm Deb Poulin. I'm the Clinical Director with the Office of Behavioral Health.
Yes.
Touch Parks, the Policy Director with Maine Early Action Project. I'm the person in recovery.
Chastity.
Chastity Tool, I use she, her pronoun. I'm representing the harm reduction community and the personal lived experience.
Jason.
Hi, my name is Grayson. I use they, them pronouns. I'm with the Attorney General's Office.
Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Boyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the coordinator for the meeting.
Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Coy, and I'm the Director of the
And Todd, back from his golfing excursion.
How did you know it was golf? My name's Todd Brackett. I'm the sheriff of Lincoln County.
And my name's Beck Kimball. I'm the current chair for the council. I'll remind people to please speak up. And where our secretary is coming in via Zoom, when you make a motion, would you please identify yourself so she knows who's saying that? Because voices sound very differently. So we will go over the agenda in a minute, but this is the first meeting where we will be taking public comment. So for the first 15 minutes, we will be taking public comment and people have been asked to sign in advance. So we have an idea of who's coming in. I just want to remind everybody that each person, I will read our procedure. Each person giving comment will have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of 3 minutes, the speaker will be asked to stop. The speaker may be given further comment by the council via email. The comment should be regarding the work of the council and do not necessarily need to regard items on the meeting's agenda. Public comment during this time shall not include a request for funding for specific individuals or organizations. Public comment should be respectful of all people and groups involved. The use of foul or threatening language, raising your voice, or general disrespectful language may cause a moderator to stop the speaking. Those are the rules that we agreed on. And I will remind the council that although you may have clarifying questions or something to say to anybody from the public, please keep those very, very brief. As this is their 15 minutes, it's not our time. And I would appreciate that. So, all right. So we do have one individual that I know of signed up for public comment, and they are here with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Pat. My name is John Conson. I'm a resident of South Portland, Maine.
All right, John, your 3 minutes is there.
Thank you. On November 4th, 2016, I heard my wife scream. Only to run up the stairs and find out that my stepson had experienced an overdose, lying blue on the floor and about to die. Luckily, we were prepared and had Narcan, and I was able to revive him, which is not a story that unfortunately many parents can share. As part of his recovery after reviving him, we experienced what many individuals that support these unbelievably wonderful kids and young adults go through. We found out that there's many different types of recovery, and not every type of recovery fits all. For some, a spiritual-based program works wonders. For others, it doesn't. We saw that over time, there's different types of support these individuals need, and my stepson needed. Financial support, emotional support, and community-based support were all part of his ongoing recovery. And we're fortunate enough for him to find that type of support, not only from us, but from the community at large. So we're fortunate. And for 8 years, he's been clean, and we're very, very excited about that. His journey changed my life. And 1 month after his overdose, I was introduced to a technology that helped change my life. For 8 years, I've been focused on helping opioid exposed newborns recover. And what I found through my journey is that these are the most vulnerable and most overlooked victims of our opioid problem. Now's babies suffer from withdrawal for 2 weeks or more, but it's really the long-term impacts that we're seeing now, or cognitive and behavioral development. And this is a lifelong suffering that they have. So my ask of the MRC is thank you so much for your incredible work. It really makes lives better throughout the state of Maine. And I'm asking also that you please keep our babies that are prenatally exposed to opioids in mind as you continue your efforts. In Maine this year, over 100 babies will be exposed to opioids before birth. And they will go not only through a difficult 2 weeks, but a lifetime of challenges related to poor cognitive and behavioral development. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Thank you that you shared your stepson's recovery and you're caring for our smallest people in our lives. I live in Penobscot County, which has the highest rate of babies born drug exposed. So I certainly understand, and I thank you for that. And the council is always looking for those gaps in services. And when we have another round, and we will have more rounds of funding, I'm hoping that we'll have someone that will be able to support our youngest and most vulnerable group of people. But I thank you very much.
Thanks.
For your comment.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to give public comment at this time? If not, I will close public comment. And I welcome next time people will come, and thank you, sir, for coming and reminding us why we're here doing this work. Thank you very much, although you rarely forget. It is always nice to know there's good people out there doing this work. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. All right, on to the agenda. The agenda is slightly changed. Our financial committee report is going to be placed towards the end because Ben, our treasurer, will be late and coming in via Zoom, and so he's asked that we move that. I will share with you a couple of business things that are going on with the council. One is, unfortunately, I had to accept the resignation of Bruce Dunn. Bruce has a change in his professional work, and so he didn't feel that he could give the time that we all know needs to happen in the council. So he's passed in his resignation. I want to publicly thank Bruce for the work that he's put in 2.5 years with the council, and his expertise and his passion for this will be missed. He was an appointee from the president of the Senate. I have notified her that there is a vacancy now, and that we will just wait for her to place a nomination and name that will become then another full member of the council. But if Bruce, if you're listening, I rather doubt it. But if you are, note that you will be missed, and we want to thank you for your work. The second thing I have in regards to business is that we discussed the school administration funds. at the last meeting, and I have asked Liz and Melissa if they would head up a subcommittee on that, and so they will be doing that work, and both Liz and Melissa, thank you very much for doing that. I know that they will do a marvelous job at this, and as soon as we start wrapping things up, they will report back to all of us how the committee will work, and we'll, at the first time, be able to really dig into those school administration funds and get those out already. So thank you for that. All right, I think that was all my announcements I needed to do.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Chastity Tool, it's really a question for Liz. What support do you guys need to get that going?
Great question. Thank you for asking. I think Melissa and I plan to, we met with Mary, we talked about it briefly, but I think we plan to get together and sort of put some either come up with some names of folks to be on it and also like reach out to people to say like, hey, DOE, who would you recommend? If you have recommendations for folks, I mean, it's really like from reading of the MOU, it's like, you know, school focused and special ed focused. So if there are, you know, of folks that you think would be work, send them our way. That would be really helpful. I think it's it's like way more written out what it can be than the prevention work group, which was like a much larger, like, you know, let's think of all the prevention gaps and then come up with priorities. This is like a way narrower scope. So I think, you know, I think it'll be easier and maybe there's not as much for folks to do until there is like having those experts help us figure out which ones to choose from. And they may be able to help us like with some guidance on like what should we be looking for? How do we make sure it's complementary, not duplicate, you know, people not trying to double dip, but I mean, I think schools are they're in a tough way right now. The point is it's supposed to be supplemental, not elective.
Yeah.
So I think that part we will really want to focus on and have some folks who understand how special ed works and how the financing works in schools to help with that. So any suggestions you have, kind of a long-winded answer, but that would be great.
Okay.
Or anyone on council that has.
Because you're right, we can't be the gap in their budgets, and we all know and empathize with the struggling school budgets, but we can't be their gap. That's not the way that the agreement went, so. But thank you both, and Jeffrey, for that comment. Let's see, next item on here is the April minutes in review. You all received a copy of the April minutes. If you have no comments or questions, I will hear a motion to accept the April minutes.
Motion to accept the April minutes from Liz, Blackmore, Betsy.
Seconded from Chastity.
Thank you. Any other comments on the minutes? If not, Grayson, will you call roll, please?
Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
I know you can't see me. My camera just decided to quit, but the answer is yes, so I know it doesn't count.
okay, I'll put you as abstain.
Okay,
Yes. Deb Bowen,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Zach Kimball,
Yes.
S. Parks.
Yes.
It is not here. Stay. It's staying.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much.
I have, excuse me, Pat, hang on for a second. Grayson, I've got that at 7, 0, and 1. Is that right?
I've got it at 8 yes and 2 abstain.
Okay, that works for me too. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, probably what you don't see is Todd's left the room for a second.
Okay. I'm still trying to figure out what happened to my camera, but you guys keep right on going. Don't stop for me.
We can hear you, it's just a B.
Oh, well, it's.
Don't go there, Betsy. All right, as I said, the finance committee is being moved down. Till Ben gets here, I can report out on the executive committee. In the hiring process, so, the executive committee, with Bruce giving his resignation and some scheduling problems. We realized that, we really should pull a couple more members onto the hiring team. So, we asked that, Deb Poulin and Tess Parks, come into the, hiring process. As we reviewed, applications and set up interviews. I can report that, we were pleasantly surprised with, 8 applications. That were very, 10, that's right. 10 applications, very, very qualified people. And trust me, it was a difficult, time to narrow that down to, we're not gonna interview all 10. So, the interviews are being scheduled, and we will be able to, hopefully be able to vote at a special meeting, which is May. Is it the 12th? Yeah.
It's on the 15th. We have interviews on the 9th and 12th, and then a week from today, it's.
Yeah, the 15th. So we have on May 15th, there will be a special meeting, that will be a Zoom, where the council can vote, and hear, who the, recommendation is and move forward. I will tell you in advance, I will not be at that meeting, I have a medical procedure that day, but, will still serve and do as many interviews as I can, but I will not be able to be there that vote, so Chastity, I'll leave that in your hands on that 15th day.
What's
I'll have to recuse from
Yeah, I was
it.
about to say, I'll be.
I'll have to recuse from it.
All right, well then Betsy will be running that meeting.
I would love to.
I mean, technically I can run the meeting, just can't vote, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
9 a.m.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
on the 15th.
Have we gotten a calendar invite or anything for that yet?
Not the Zoom link, but it's noticed on the calendar page.
On the calendar.
Yeah.
It's scheduled from 9 to 10. I don't think
Okay.
we will need more than half an hour.
Yeah.
If that.
Okay.
We just need to have a formal vote with the full. So,
Yeah.
for those who don't take it.
And I'd appreciate it now if you know you cannot be there, because we have to have a forum. So if you would just contact Mary, please, if you cannot be on the 15th at 9, and we may have to, hopefully not, but we have to just figure out a forum.
Okay. I can be on.
Right, and the process is going very well. We have, some good questions to ask, and, we're moving forward, on that. And hopefully, unfortunately, we'll have to say goodbye to Mary. June will be, Mary's last meeting with us. But, we have some good candidates. Brendan?
Hi,
Yes.
thanks, Pat. I just want to ask a question of Grayson about if this is the meeting where there will not be a public Zoom available. This is not the meeting.
No, those are that's for the interviews.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you want to just take it may be helpful just to, at some point, take a minute to sort of announce that or explain that to any public that are listening.
Okay.
So any
Doesn't have to
public-
be right now, but
Yeah.
you know.
Well, we might as well. So any public that's listening, all of the interviews, the application reviews are all done in executive session, per the vote of the council. So all of that is not open to the public. Once the candidate is chosen and the vote comes before the full council, that meeting will be available for the public, to attend. But to protect the privacy of those people that are applying, we have gone into executive session. To be able to do that, and that was a vote of the full council to do that way. That's how we hired Mary and Elizabeth. So that's where we are. All right, so, and I don't see Joe Everett, so I am gonna switch all over here.
Can I add to the
Yeah.
hiring process as well? So what we will do after the interviews are finished is while we're still in executive session, the executive committee will make a recommendation as to who to hire. We will then reach out to that candidate and talk to their references. We will let them know the executive committee will be recommending them to the full council. Hopefully we can, get their confirmation that they want to move forward with the position by the 15th. But if not, the executive committee will have a second recommendation as well. So the candidate will be notified prior to that public meeting, I guess is what I want to make sure to communicate.
Yeah, we don't
That
want,
will not be the first time.
we will not surprise them. Thank you. So because none of the chairs of the committees are here, they're all running late, I'm gonna go to item number 6. I'm going to the executive director's report, and we're gonna start with contract updates. And before we start, I just want to tell you, these people have done an amazing piece with contracts. I mean, getting them out, getting them done, getting them signed. I think my phone beeps all the time saying, here's another one to review and sign. So I can tell you, it is absolutely a joy. To what they are doing with that. So go for it, Mary, and tell us where we are.
We are pulling up the report now.
It's pretty massive. It's been massive and wonderful. I'm glad pulling that up. On May 15th. At 9 o'clock, there was a Zoom meeting where we will vote on the recommendation of the new executive director. And if you can't come, if you can let us know in advance, because we have to make sure we have a quorum. Thank you. All right.
No problem. Put it in the calendar.
All right. Yeah, doesn't want to move.
So I want to start by giving an update on contracts. As you all know, that has been a big focus of our work the past couple months. The last time we all met, we had 8 contracts that were finalized, and we received Pat's signature at the meeting. We had a deadline of last Friday to get as many contracts as we could to the AG's office, as one of our benchmarks. We were able to finalize 28 contracts, in addition to the 8. So we had 36 contracts that have been finalized. Majority of them have signatures. There are a few of those 28 where the provider had asked us to hold off on processing them, and so we didn't obtain signatures. I'm very proud to say that 28 also includes all of our legacy contracts, which includes Maine Community Action Program, includes Tessa's House. Everything we have voted on besides a few remaining grant awards have all been processed or in a process of. Yes,
Sorry, I just wanted to add that it's over $14 million in funding that's going out from those contracts. And thank you guys for all your work that you've done to get this funding in.
That was no small feat, I would say. That was a beast of a project.
It was huge.
We have a few remaining, there's about 12 that we are in the process of finalizing. I don't foresee any issues with us getting those drafted As we've talked about, there are certain timelines that we have to abide by that state offices have set, the Attorney General's office has set. So at this point, what we are doing is finalizing contracts to the extent we can. Those will be in the queue and ready when they can be processed. But the Maine Recovery Council has little jurisdiction over the process from here on out. But I will make sure that those remaining contracts are all finalized.
Yay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Any questions about contracts? Okay. I do want to mention there was a couple adjustments to the timeframes of some of those. I won't get into the details of that, but a few of them, we only had the capacity and the allotment to do 1-year contracts. So we will just have to renew them next year. It's not a big issue, but I just want to make sure you all are aware that that will happen. Contract will stay the exact same. We'll just change the dates and reissue the payments. Let me mention that for those contracts where the timeline was a little bit of an issue, those are for the legacy contracts. That will be the case for grant. And I will, again, talk to you individually about that if it was. Great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the timeline looks like from here on out. As you all saw in your packet, you have some information about an RFP, also a contract amendment for Very Done. So I want to outline what the timeline looks like over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So you'll have a sense of what we need and what I'm looking ahead at, and then what, we'll need to kind of fall under the jurisdiction of the next PD. As we mentioned earlier, we are holding interviews for an executive director this Friday and also Monday. The 15th at 9 a.m., we have a full council meeting for the executive committee to bring forth their recommendation for the new ED. By May 23rd, we have to have a contract signed and sent over to the HG's office. And so as soon as we have that name, we'll begin the vendor process information, kind of getting that set up. Grayson helped me develop the contract template for that already. So it's kind of just a plug and play from here, which is great. That once we have the name and the approval, that can essentially be set. I will note that the recommendation from the executive committee will need to include the individual's name, obviously, and then the salary as well. Right now we have up to a certain amount, but we will have to determine exactly what that hourly is so we can move forward with a contract total. At the next June council meeting, we will have all the contracts finalized. Just want to again make mention of that. If there are questions, that would be the time for us to review them. I won't ask for signatures at that time, but I want to just mention that if there are any outstanding contract related questions that I can answer, that would be the time. My last full day is the 13th, Friday after that. And then we are going to be looking at a break between the 16th and the 30th, between when my time as full-time ED ends and when the new ED takes on their full-time position. Pat is aware of this, and we've been talking to Sarah, who's been providing some mentorship to both Elizabeth and I, trying to help with this transition. And so Pat will provide oversight and support on the day-to-day work as needed. And Elizabeth and I are engaging in conversations around what will be needed, and we'll continue to have those conversations as time goes on. But I want to make sure that the council is aware that I will be out of town. I'll not have my laptop or be available, and we won't really have a point person during those 2 weeks. And so there may be a delay in communication or just additional need for patience as we make that transition. I will be on to provide support through July and beginning of August. Pending a couple weeks, there's a 1 week in particular where I won't be around, but I will be providing transition support and helping onboard the new ED and taking on more of a part-time role. I'm limiting myself to 15 hours a week as my graduate classes start, but I will be around and would be happy to answer questions from you all as they come up. But really at that point, I'll be meeting with the new ED, supporting Elizabeth as well, and helping to make sure the transition can be hopefully as seamless as possible. Any questions about the upcoming transition and the timeline?
A little scary.
It'll
It'll be fine.
Everything will work out.
It'll be fine.
So in the short term, again, there's a couple of things that are pretty top of mind for me. In addition to contracts, and actually finishing those up, we're now starting to think about what reporting looks like, as well as monitoring those contracts and ensuring compliance. We're at the very beginning of these contract terms, but establishing processes is more important now than ever. What we've been able to do, or theoretically what we'll be able to do, is have Barry Dunn, who's currently providing contract development support, stay on and provide additional services related to contract monitoring and compliance. This would be a short-term solution, and we talked about this with the full council and then also with the committee. I believe program grants and finance has discussed this. What they will do is just provide a bridge so that we have some time between when the RFP goes out and we can have a true competitive bidding process. And make sure that we have the support we need as staff to ensure that our grantees are in compliance with the reporting requirements that we've set forth. So everyone is aware, what we have done is the terms of our contract outline to some extent what this report looks like, but we have also developed a reporting template, which Elizabeth will walk you through. And they all know that within 30 days of their contract start date is when we will be sending that out. Our goal is to have that finalized and shared with our grantees by the end of May. At this point, I don't see any issue with that. I think the draft we have is fairly solid, and our contract does allow us to amend it if needed. But I do want to mention that we will be providing our own contract template. And there are a variety of reasons as to why we're moving forward with that decision. Again, Elizabeth can talk more about that. But just so you all are aware, we have done a majority of the work to develop the reporting template, but we will need support to make sure that we can actually oversee the 54 contracts that we will have out.
Harry, just a quick question. Those 54 include the ones that are in place now.
Yes. Yep.
I was just doing math in my head.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't have 54. Yes, for us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So just a little bit about sort of the timeline, again, looking ahead, so we're all on the same page. We also have an RFP in this packet that we'll go over. I think if there are substantial changes we need to make, we will want to bring those to the finance committee to approve, and we can move forward with a vote here to allow the committee to have the authority to do that. My hope is that if we can have the finance committee finalize the RFP by the 16th, we can have that published by the 21st. My recommendation is that we move forward with posting that RFP to our website specifically. If we do post it to the state website, there would be potential complications and challenges with doing that. And I do think maintaining our independence and our ability to oversee our own processes is important. So just so everyone's aware, please, share that with your networks, much like we did with the ED position, but that won't be a formal state RFP. I'm recommending we give about 6 weeks for folks to bid on that process. At the end of June, we can have all those applications submitted to us. During our July council meeting would be the first time that the council begins to review and evaluate those RFP bids. I do want to make note, our July council meeting is currently scheduled for the same day as the governor's summit, so we will need to reschedule that. And Elizabeth or I will be reaching out probably tomorrow to make sure we can get a date and time settled for that. Thank you, Tess, for reminding me of that. My recommendation is that based on our contracting timeline and also the proposed amendment for Barry Dunn, that we will need to have a vendor selected no later than August 14th, which is the date of the August council meeting. If we're able to do that, then I don't foresee any issues with us having a start date of October 1. For the new vendor, or if they're done bids, for them to continue their services. Their amendment currently goes till September 30th, if we can attach or adopt what I outlined here. I do want to note, the RFP right now, and we can discuss this further, really focuses on monitoring and compliance. Evaluation was part of the discussion we had with our finance committee. The RFP currently does not include evaluation. We had discussed the possibility of the Catherine Cutler Institute potentially providing some support. Based on my understanding of their contract with the Attorney General's office, that's not part of their scope of services. We could certainly partner with them to provide additional evaluation for the MRC specifically, but I do want to note that an additional RFP may be necessary and or adding the evaluation scope of services to this RFP, maybe how we move forward.
Liz?
Yeah, I guess I have thoughts about that. Only because, I mean, I totally get that, like, we need to move forward on this to help with the contract monitoring. I'm concerned about separating contract monitoring and evaluation. Because if you ask twice, so evaluation, like, you wanna ask certain questions, like to get at, like, what's the impact that this project is having? And you can get most of the monitoring things you need from those questions. But monitoring questions don't necessarily match and meet evaluation needs.
Yeah.
So you can ask monitoring questions that ask like, okay, did you do X, Y, Z? Did you, like, did you spend the money? Who did you spend it on? Like almost like sort of auditing questions. And then there can be like, what activities did you do? But did you make an impact? Is like a different set of questions or a different like thought, like a way to think about it. And I don't know that we wanna do it twice. Like, do you wanna have two different people asking questions that are that could be similar? You could get most of the monitoring stuff out of evaluation.
Yeah.
And I think putting out evaluation to bid is not a bad idea, like, and I think there are a lot of organizations across in Maine, but also across the country who are doing this like at a large scale for other states that I think we should give them the option to do it, because the evaluation for this stuff is not easy. And to have somebody who can do some of that stuff for the prevention work too would be great, who we can work with on really understanding how to understand if we've been making an impact and how to come to us and show us. I'm not saying Catherine Cutler can't do it, I just think putting it out to bid is not, I prefer that if we have time. And if you have a timeline that matches that, to give some other opportunities to organizations that might have some experience doing it already with this large scale kind of work. So that they can come to us and say like, okay, this thing is really having an impact, or this thing, I don't know, so we can't figure it out yet with this data that we've collected. Those are my thoughts.
So, thank you, Liz. I'm a little confused, and I know we're not talking about the RFP yet. But there's a section in here that talks about grant evaluation and project data collection as part of the RFP. So I'm a little confused as to saying, is it included in with this or isn't it? Because it's here under section C. It says grant evaluation and project data collection.
So maybe it was. I'm sorry, that was my fault. I thought it was just specific to the monitoring and oversight.
Yeah.
If the evaluation in section C then is sufficient, we can move forward with that. I have been thinking about evaluation as separate than data collection, so I would want to make sure that we separate those two. Given that the monitoring and compliance and the work that we are asking Barry Dunn to do in the short term will also include the collection piece, the data collection piece, but has nothing to do with the grant evaluation. But I agree, Liz, that if we want to make sure that we have our processes working in tandem and not be separate.
And if we're like doing like our wish list here, I mean, one thing I would say is that the grant evaluator or whoever gets the evaluation, like you put in there, that they are to work with the grantees on coming up with the metrics for doing this. Because I can't tell you how many times you have grant evaluators who they don't talk to the people doing the work to understand how to evaluate it. They just come up with things and say, collect this data. So if we could foster collaboration with the grantees, I think that'd be awesome. And I wonder if just calling it an RFP that's grant management and evaluation, like putting if we're gonna do it as evaluation, putting in the title, so you get organizations that have experience in evaluation. Great.
And I will say that our current proposal for the reporting template does include collaboration with the grantees for them to select what they see as sort of the top process measures, right? And make sure that aligns also with our any improvements. So.
I did see them. It's great. Great.
Any other questions or concerns about what Mary's reported so far? I don't see hands up on Zoom. From here, so. And at some point in time, we probably should ask Catherine Cutler Institute to come back to share with us what they are currently doing. And they do have some information on the municipalities, which we make interesting. Susan and I talked with Lindsay the other day in regards to another project. They're doing some work. We may want to invite them back for an educational session as to where they are and what they're doing with the work.
Can I ask a quick, is Maggie still on and not showing up?
Maggie?
Or is she not on? Okay. Yeah, I just feel like this is something she'll have thoughts on too, so maybe if we can just like.
I think
touch base
Maggie
with her.
actually, if I'm looking
Is gonna
here.
come back. Yeah,
I just emailed us just some feedback.
Yeah,
She wants to share it.
Yes.
So we'll do RFP discussions.
Okay, great, because I just feel like this is totally her jam and.
Yeah, she
she's not her.
She has some great
Expertise.
feedback and she actually gave it to us.
Great.
In regards to scoring and things like that, so but she is gone and I can either read this to her or she's back. Oh,
We're talking about you, Maggie.
we're gonna put you on the spot, Maggie. We're talking about your comments that you have. Well, again, first, let me step back for a minute. Are we on the discussion of the RFP, or do you have other things you want to talk about before we move on to the discussion of the RFP? Yeah, three-ish.
I would think I would like to hold up until Ben is involved in the conversation, if that's okay with everyone. Maggie, will you be online at 3? Okay.
Yeah, I should be online for the next half an hour and then I'll have to step off for like 20 minutes and then I'll be back. Sorry about that.
No worries. If everyone's okay with that, I think Ben will have really constructive feedback. That I'd like to incorporate.
Okay, so we'll put that,
We'll wait.
we'll
Yeah.
wait on the RFP.
But this provides some context around the timeline and the reason as to why this is before all of you. What we can talk about now, while we're on the subject, is the Barry Dunn amendment. I'll point you to the last page. The front page is not, we don't need to discuss that really. But as you see on the last page, the proposed deliverables are really around contract monitoring and compliance. Not the evaluation pieces I mentioned. And then I've also included some technical assistance support. So that they can provide support to myself, the community, and also specifically Elizabeth, when we do start to work directly with our grantees. There are a handful of them where reporting is fairly new, and I want to ensure that we have the capacity to support them and set them up for success. I think that will look like having at least 1 or 2 technical assistance sessions this summer. Just prior to reporting and then possibly after the reports are due. And I would recommend we do that for at least the next 6 months. So that we can help people get comfortable and familiar with our reporting. And I think that would provide a huge benefit to the staff as well. And the council. This proposal it would extend their current contract for 2 months and would include the proposed services we have outlined here. I've spoken with Barry Dunn, and the current contract is a total value of $50,000. And we don't see any reason for us to have to add additional funds.
All of you should have gotten that copy of the draft of that amendment in your email today, as well as those who are here. There's a copy on the table. You want to vote on this, right?
I'm like, yes, I need a vote. I don't need a signature, but I need a vote so that the Attorney General can move forward with something.
So questions in regard to this amendment with Barry Dunn?
And this was developed after conversations with folks at Barry Dunn, who we work with each week. And it was, the language was developed sort of through a combination of the language I proposed and the language they had proposed. And hopefully this is something that they will come forward as well. I've shared the draft and I'm not back with any feedback. But certainly if there's any major questions or changes there, but I'll let you all know.
Maggie, you have your hand up.
Thanks. You may have spoken to this, Mary. It was a little bit hard for me to hear. But can you just speak to the relationship between the RFP and this amendment? Because it does seem like there's some overlap in scope. So if you can just help clarify where one starts and the other ends, that would be great.
Yeah, so this contract amendment is essentially a miniature version of the RFP. It's the earliest that we can select a vendor and contract out these services through a competitive bidding process would be October 1. And so what this allows us to do is utilize Barry Dunn's services through the end of September, specifically around contract compliance and monitoring, knowing that we will need to begin at least our first round of reporting. And they have the expertise to help us get that process started. It intentionally does not include evaluation because, as we've been discussing and talked about in prior meetings, the evaluation piece I see as longer term, and I would want the vendor that we have on to support us, for 2 to 3 years, work with us to develop those evaluation metrics and help us determine whether or not these projects have been successful. That isn't something that I see as a role Barry Dunn should be playing at this point, given that this is a short-term solution.
Does that answer your questions, Maggie?
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful to understand how we're thinking about this as a pass off. I guess for vendors on the other side of the RFP, there's a lot in this Barry Dunn amendment that would, if it came to fruition, would remove those items from the RFP. And so I think it may make it confusing for bidders on the RFP to know what's done and what's not done. Although I understand why we may want to leave this as a range, I wonder if we can clarify that it's including up to the following to give that language flexibility to indicate we don't expect Barry Dunn to deliver on all of that in 2 months, because that's really almost like some of the system level work of thinking and developing the systems is far more than a 2-month effort. And so if we embed some language around up to that maybe would be flexible enough to allow you to pull what you needed within this 2 months to meet that, or you and Pat, but also clarify for the RFP bidders that we aren't guaranteeing that these things are already in place, and that's why we want the RFP to assume they're not in place, and so they need to build. Does that make sense? Sorry.
It does. It makes perfect sense, and I appreciate that suggestion. And I like the up to the following language change, because I do think each of these deliverables could apply, and it's a little bit hard to tell right now. They've not gone through the reporting cycle with the council before. So I'd like to include the broad scope of services, but they won't necessarily be required to complete all of these, and I think that's an important distinction for us to make. If you're comfortable with us changing the language to up to the following, I think that's very aligned with the conversations we've had and also with the intention behind this.
Thank you. Other comments on the amendment to the Very Done contract?
I also want to note that part of sort of the broader language of this was intended to allow the new ED to pull from their services what they think will be most applicable and most necessary. I recognize that I don't want to tie their hands at this point and want them to have autonomy over their leadership of the council and be able to do that in the way they see fit. So hopefully this again encompasses the potential services they may need. But the new ED will certainly be part of the evaluation process during the year.
And so you need to vote. Yes. So do I hear a motion that we accept the amendment recommendations with the following, with the suggested changes? And move this forward. Do I hear a first? Do I hear a motion? We accept with the changes.
So move.
We also include the 2-month extension to September 30th.
So this is to make an amendment for the 2-month extension for Very Done, including the changes that have been suggested at this meeting. Paul moved. Do I hear a second? Second. And Deb seconded.
Who did?
Deb.
Thank you.
If no further comment, can you call the roll, please?
Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Chastity Tool,
Yes.
Deb Pullen.
Yes.
Joe Everett. Yes. Liz Blackmore.
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Paul Vincent,
Yes.
Tess Parks,
Yes.
and Todd Rankin.
Yes.
Thank you.
And here we want to go to all age. All right, gonna put you, because we move things around a little, so we're gonna go to governance committee, and I'm gonna turn it over to Paul to report on the governance committee.
All right, thank you very much. So the governance committee met on April 25 by Zoom. And basically we talked about the bylaws. We had a really robust discussion around this. The bylaws with the FOA statute. The FOA statute defines public proceedings as the transaction of any functions affecting any and all citizens of the state. And that public notice shall be given for all public proceedings as defined in section 402, if these proceedings are a meeting of a body or agency consisting of 3 or more persons. Speaking to the FOA ombudsman, she interprets that 3 or more persons to be regarding the body or agency, not the meeting. So in other words, the Recovery Council is a body consisting of more than 3 or more persons, so that any meeting of any members of the council, 2 or more people, if they're discussing any functions affecting any or all citizens of the state, would be a meeting and would require 14-day notice. So what I want, Brendan has a written proposal for the MRC bylaws change regarding this. And I wanted to wait for his proposal because he knows how to put language like that together, but I do not. But I think we were all pretty much in agreement that that's how we should we should tighten it up. It's been kind of loose, and I think that creates a risk. It was pointed out that that will make us more efficient. Some people felt we really couldn't even function that way. When I discussed that with the ombudsman, she stated, "You're right. It's not meant to be efficient. The FOA is not meant to be efficient. It's meant to be transparent." Is it going to slow us down? It might. And in regard to that, what I would like to do as part of the governance committee is to have a presentation to the Recovery Council at some point by someone who is an expert in efficiency of meetings, so that we can make sure we are all in these meetings as efficient as possible, so we can get as much work done as possible in the time we have. Because we won't be talking outside of these meetings about anything. Now, Maggie had an interesting thought about how municipalities handle this, and they handle it a little bit differently. I really struggled understanding what Maggie was, how she was putting that. And so she was going to present it in person to us at some point. She can't be in person today, so she's not up to, oh, there she is. Maggie.
I can't speak to that. That's not my role. There are Brendan can tell us how we should interpret this.
But you were talking about how the municipalities.
I think it was just the fine line between like what is something that affects the function versus like, so what is decision making versus discussion before decision making, and where those lines are drawn around that. So anyway, Brendan and others can be the minds of experts on that.
When I talked to the ombudsman about that, what she stated was that you don't want someone coming to this meeting today, and we say, we're going to, at the next meeting, talk about such and such. And then at the next meeting, we vote on it, and everyone has made their decision, but no one knows how we came to that decision. So if the discussion is done outside of the meeting, then the public doesn't know how we came to that decision. And that's not transparent.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Because I feel like we've been following the 3 or more has to be like, I don't see that anyone has had meetings in which there have been 3 or more people in them that weren't public meetings. So I guess I'm not, is it because the bylaws don't say that we feel like we need to tighten this up? Because I haven't had that experience.
The
So
bylaws say that a meeting of 3 or more people is okay. I mean, a meeting of less than 3 or more people. I'm sorry, the bylaws state that if you have a meeting of 3 or more people, it needs to have advance notice.
right.
The FOA says any meeting of two people.
Of 2 or 3?
Of 2. FOA says, so the 3 or more in FOA relates to how big is the council. So any council that has 3 or more people, any meeting of any of those people, of two or more of those, would be a violation of the FOA.
So you're saying that we essentially, by what your definition, and I guess we'll have to hear from Brendan about this, you're saying that we essentially can have no conversations with anyone about anything about the council unless we're in a public meeting.
Anything that has
I have not experienced.
transaction affecting any or all citizens of the state. So that's correct.
So Paul, just for clarification, because I this too. So FOA says that, right?
Yes.
And then the council bylaws loosen it up a little bit, is that what you said, Artie?
I'm gonna let
Okay, thank you.
Brendan
Yeah.
answer that, because this conversation started with, again, there's, in our bylaws. It says one thing, and then Brendan had brought to us, probably about a year ago, he wanted to clarify them a little. And the council had some difference of opinion, so we brought it back to the governance committee. We never brought it back, other business came in and didn't get done. But Brendan has a suggested change in the bylaws in regards to BOA and meetings. And it was the intent to bring that back to the governance committee. And Brendan, if you want to clarify what that is, I will let you do that.
Thanks, Pat. And Paul, let me know if I'm sort of going off track of what you're thinking about, because I don't think I was able to attend that governance committee meeting.
You are on vacation. Yeah.
And I was thinking about completely different things. It's my understanding that the bylaws may be able to be pulled up, and we can show the change that I'm suggesting. So let me know when that's available. But in the meantime, let me just sort of, okay, here we go. So first, in concrete terms, the change I'm suggesting, I think, is pretty simple. In section 4.6, notice of meetings, my proposal is to simply strike the first sentence. And I'll give you a chance to read it. So I think, that would be sufficient from my point of view, so that the section 4.6 simply starts with, notice shall be made in a manner to comply with FOA. The interpret that, as you're talking about, the application of FOA is not as black and white as I think a lot of people in the state would like it to be. There's different attorneys throughout the state who advise different bodies who apply FOAs, in different ways. I'm here advising, the council, not, municipalities or the legislature or anybody else. And my understanding is, as Paul described, that, FOA basically says anytime a body discusses in a substantive way anything that affects the transactions of that body, and I'm kind of, I'm not describing, FOA's guidance precisely, though I could. But in general, to the extent you're having any kind of substantive discussion that could affect, or influence the transactions of the body in a way that it affects, or impacts the public in Maine, the public needs to have transparency into that, needs to be able to see it and access and hear it. And, there's some, court cases in Maine that interpret FOA, and at least one of them that I've shared with the council suggests that not just as Paul described, the point is, the public needs to know how the council got from point A to point C in its decision making about a particular issue. In the middle there could be discussions of that issue, and that really can't happen among council members. It's got to happen unless that happens in public. Also included in that process, and I point to this court case for this idea, is even just gathering information about it. I had originally hoped that the council could, engage in, fact gathering or information gathering, and then come back and discuss that and, have its deliberations at the council. But at least one court in Maine has said, no, even that kind of gathering of information is something that the public needs to have access to. The kinds of things that FOA does not require a public meeting for in general is sort of administrative things that can be done over email, like scheduling meetings, or things that are sort of strictly administrative and don't really, change or affect how the council is transacting its work. I think there's a broad range of ways to interpret the council's, actions. For example, is putting something on an agenda or not, substantive, or is, but, I would say, for example, working a proposed text policy for something over email would probably not be appropriate to be done over email. It would be one thing to say, to communicate over, like to email others, here's my proposed policy that that we're going to talk about at the next meeting. I'm sending it to you in advance so you have it and can consider it. I think that makes perfect sense. And then others, be prepared to show up at the meeting and discuss whatever changes you want. But, working it through red lines and things like that over email in between meetings, that would not be, I think, within the spirit of FOA. So I'll stop there and see if, Paul, is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yes, thank you, Brendan. I'll give an example of something that I did that I didn't realize was in violation of FOA. Is that when I would do the minutes for the finance committee or the governance committee, I would usually send those out to the committee members for their comment before I submitted them. And that is discussing council business outside of the public. So that is actually a violation that that the ombudsman pointed out had on one of her frequently asked questions. So I no longer do that. I just submit it. And if it's got mistakes, we'll correct them later.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to just, I've circulated before to the council, and you can access the ombudsman's website. Reviewing the frequently asked questions on the website, I think is quite helpful. And, I'm happy to help the council work through how to get its work done in compliance with FOA.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I don't have my copy of the bylaws with me. Your suggestion makes sense to me, Brandon. Is meeting otherwise defined in the bylaws?
It's defined in FOA. And I can tell you, and Paul, you may have reviewed this more recently than I have, but let me just take 2 seconds and pull it up. So a public proceeding, as Paul described, means a transaction of any functions affecting any or all citizens of the state, by bodies like this one. That's the definition of public proceedings. It doesn't otherwise define meetings in FOA, and our bylaws. Let me just confirm that our bylaws do not separately have. I mean, I know there's no definitions, but it doesn't sort of, separately define what a meeting is. Perhaps it would be more accurate if the section 4.6 said notice of all public proceedings, but I think leaving it at meetings is fine. Does that?
Yeah, it does. It's good.
But just to be clear, I'm perhaps still having a moment.
Yeah, I know.
So Liz and I talk. We strike that first sentence. Are we in violation?
What are you?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, so that's sort of the gray area.
If
That makes it gray, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I would suggest that first sentence misstates the law.
And my second thought is just that we've talked about this, but I think it's going to push the council to really to live within this framework. We need way more staff.
Right.
Like we're like many of us have been at this for 3 years. We're like staff. It's like a part-time job. It's full-time job for
Trust me.
So I think that's the only thing, like really limiting us that way. Like in my day job, the staff are doing a lot, the board's doing they're advising. We have not been advising, we've been doing.
Right.
this.
And
So I
that's
think-
why it's made it so hard
Exactly.
to do this not talking thing, because we're like trying to do the work. And so with more staff, it'll help us not do the work. Like, I don't wanna do the work. I have a full-time job. I mean, I love advising. I wanna advise on like, here
And that's what most boards or
Yeah.
councils do.
Yeah, I mean, before I would go do the work, like, I'd be happy to do the work if it was my job. It's cool work. I'm not saying that. I just don't, we need, yes.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's got a
a,
plan for more staff, so we can abide by this.
it's a very, this is, I've served on a lot of boards, and this is very unique in the way that it's set up. You really are, I think you're almost staff.
Yeah.
You're doing the actual on the ground work, where if you're on an ordinary board, you go to the meeting, you receive information, you look it over, you talk about it, you vote on it. Here, we're knee deep into it, and again, I think eventually you'll see this board evolve. And in 6 years, you're gonna see it be very different than it is now, but that's just the growing pains of it. But we do have to stay within the guidelines of it, that sometimes it seems silly. And I'll tell you, sometimes it makes me tear my hair out, cause I have to have the 14 notice, day notice thing drives me insane. Because I'm trying to deal with 15 schedules to get meetings going, and so it becomes really difficult. But again, it's what it is, and we have to deal with it. And we just have to make sure our bylaws are compliant with the law.
And I would just, we kind of talked about this in governance, Paul, I think we're also charged with protecting the future of the council.
Yep.
Like, we don't want it to be off the rails with 5 people controlling everything down the road, or like kind of what we're seeing, so I think protecting the future is really important, so that it's not off the rails in 10 years where it's nothing like where we
And
started.
it's an odd thing, because there are term limits. And so it really, and there's no alternating term limits. Todd?
Brendan, I think we've been pretty successful thus far, with the language the way it is. I mean, have you procedurally, have we been making some mistakes that you're aware of, or that as we got some things done? I mean, without going down a rap, I mean, obviously, you can't send the minutes around, right? Because I get that, but I don't have any problem with changing it. I think it clarifies it, makes the bylaws conform with the law. That makes perfect sense to me. Practically, I think we're way overthinking it. Just me. But,
No, we are.
But we need to be cautious, we need to be respectful of the law, and we certainly need to be transparent. I don't object to that, but if if 2 of us have a conversation on the phone or via email, 2 of us that can't bind the council to anything, we can't even bind our committees to anything.
So Todd,
Yeah.
let me just address that scenario real quick. The risk there, that's kind of something that's the kind of scenario that I think the FOA rule around meetings is one of the ways it can be sort of thwarted is through sort of the game of telephone, where like two members of a body have a conversation, and then one of them then calls the next person, and then calls the next person, and then you can always have this sort of ring of 2-person conversations that could end up solidifying or destabilizing some positions about a particular decision, and that those kinds of like individual conversations about substance are what FOA is meant to say, require that be actually done in public.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I didn't mean to imply that, and me of all people probably around the table should know that people can bend the rules.
No, I would assure know that.
So I wasn't what I was thinking. I just didn't know if there was something alarming that you'd seen about our behavior, other than bringing the bylaws into compliance that we need to really change.
You may understand that I will not be addressing that in this meeting.
Okay.
But I think if we just sort of
Yeah, so for the sake of meeting and moving on, we will discuss this more in governance, and if a change is suggested, we will bring that change to the full board and as to why that change in the bylaws is. But for the sake of moving the meeting forward, it will going back to governance, and we will discuss it some more. Any other thing to report? tonight?
Yes, I wanted to talk about, next is a discussion, about members of MRC speaking with the press and testifying to the legislature. And we came up with wording that we would like to, recommend that the council vote on, making this the way we do business for this. And I'll read it in full. Maine Recovery Council, so we recommend you pass this. Maine Recovery Council members may be asked by reporters to comment regarding council business. When this occurs, the members should refer the reporter to the executive director. The executive director has the best grasp of the business of council. It's recommended that council members not speak to the press about council business. Next paragraph, regarding testifying to the legislature. Maine Recovery Council members may testify to the legislature regarding issues they have interest in. It is not required that they identify themselves as a member of the MRC, though they may disclose it if they're asked. If MRC members are asked to speak to legislatures regarding the members' particular expertise, the member should include the MRC executive director and the chair in this discussion.
Paul, would you send that to me, please? I can't write as fast as you can talk.
Sure, I think it's in it. Do you have the packet?
It's in the packet, so
It's in the packet.
minutes.
It's
Okay, fine. Thank you.
it's in bold at the end of the governance committee meeting.
Okay,
And somehow after rereading this today, I know Brendan has questions on it. I'm rereading this today and saying, we really did not run it past Brendan when we determined it. It was the one missing meeting. So would you like to comment on it now? Or would you like us to postpone this to the next governance meeting and we hash it before it comes before us again?
I'm happy to defer it to the governance committee meeting. I just want to the only thing that sort of immediately jumped out at me is the third sentence about talking to the legislature. It is not required that members identify themselves as a member of the Recovery Council, though they may disclose this if asked. And I just want to check and see if the intent really is that Recovery Council members can only identify themselves as such if asked, or can they proactively say, I'm a member of the Recovery Council and I'm here testifying.
Brendan, the reason we put the wording in the way we did is that we did not want the members testifying as part of the Recovery Council.
Or on behalf of.
Or on behalf of, yes.
My
So if
that would be to say and you're not testifying on behalf of, but to wait until somebody asks us to say I'm a council member seems sort of strange. Yeah. Like I should be able to say I'm a member, but I'm not speaking on behalf of.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to hear Tess testify before the HHS committee about the bill regarding reporting by subdivisions. And Tess, my recollection is the way you did it was sort of along the lines of, you explained the organization you work for, that you're a member of the Recovery Council, but that you're there testifying, as a member of your organization. Is that, do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I said that I was a member of the council, but that my testimony was specifically on behalf of the statewide team of MERAP organizers. And I felt like not identifying my connection to the council would be misleading when I was working particularly on a bill related to opioid settlement funds. But I don't use I'm an MRC member in any other testimony that I'm from.
Yeah, I think it was because the particular bill was very much connected, not necessarily to the council's work, but the opioid settlement dollars.
In my connection to the issue.
Yeah, so it was a good to disclose it. So I don't know whether go
I
back.
guess I just wonder whether it's like reason, whether the maybe it's the governance committee or the full council, might consider it's okay for a council member to identify themselves as being part of a council member, but they have to be specific about whether they're testifying, on behalf of the council.
And this
You know.
whole conversation came up because we had a couple members asking us specifically. What is the role in regards to if you're contacted by the press and what is? So we were trying to come up with a statement that generally. Was there so council members understood. When press approaches you or when a bill has something to do with the council, what the procedures are with that. I think it maybe needs some work. I don't know how others feel.
Yeah, I think, I understand that last sentence, it's a little confusing to me. I think it's clear to me. You don't want me to speak on behalf of the council. You know what I mean? But I don't think that you want me to call Mary and Pat to tell them about testimony I'm about to give about jail funding. Right, which is maybe my area of expertise in that particular bill, right? So I don't think that's what you're trying to accomplish here, right? I get what you're trying to do, it's just not really clear in that sentence. Assume that's right. I'll be glad to call you about jail funding if you want to go help me.
I love jail funding conversations. I'm on the board of visitors, so I don't know how Paul feels as chair, but I think maybe this needs to go back and have a little bit of work done on it.
Yeah.
Before we take a vote.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we're gonna table that and bring it back to governance. All right, thank you. Thank you for the input with that. We can fix that. And Brendan, you'll be at the meeting and be able to steer us in the correct direction.
I hope so.
Paul, anything else on the committee?
No, that was it. That was all we discussed when we left.
All right, thank you very much. Joe. Grants and programming.
Mary. We've been really in the grants conversation, the process. I don't think anything we have to report that. Do we meet since the last
No,
council meeting?
the
We're going back to once a month.
Yep, last time we met, we talked about reporting and what our plan is over for the next 6 months to a year. And Elizabeth had laid out 3 different options, one where the council is pretty hands-off, one where the council is more involved. It was the consensus of both the program and grants committee and the finance committee. That the council, as we've been discussing, does not want to be involved in the reporting necessarily, or be involved in the oversight and monitoring of our grantees. But instead for staff or a vendor to be the ones to determine if there are any issues or potential issues. Have a process to try to resolve that, and then if that's not possible, bring those issues to the council. We discussed with program grants that in the interim, the committee specifically may be more involved in the day-to-day, especially after the first and second round, or during really the first and second round of reporting. But that was the primary discussion. And we did not set the date that we would meet again. Because as Joe said, we're gonna move to once a month.
The last time we met was April 15th.
Yeah. And I think right now, I think there's not a lot of focus work for the committee. We need to meet during the month of May.
After third grade.
Yes, again, they are a committee that has been meeting and doing a lot of work. And I think at the last meeting, I think we all agreed we needed to step back a little bit, breathe, and then regroup and meet again, so. All
The
right,
only thing I would add to, and not to make people wanna lose their minds, but we talked about sort of strategic planning. We get requests from people to visit, they're asking, how do I get in front of the council? So I think we all are in agreement that we need a strategic planning process to talk about, like, what do we wanna learn about? What would that look like in terms of guest speakers, but not to have random, oh, Liz, great, we'll sign you up, or, so we just want to have a process, but I think we realized that we did not have the capacity to dive into strategic planning this afternoon. So the ways out, but I think we are eager to do that. Because we have a program and grants committee and so that'll likely be the fall or maybe even the new year. The year is flying by, so. Yes. We'll start, we'll be all done. Our term will be out. We'll get it started.
Be somebody. All right, well, Joe, thank you very much for that report. And I think at this point, we will discuss the RFP. Is that where we are with the coordinator's report? Is that the intent?
We're gonna wait on the RFP until we've got Maggie and
Oh, that's
Diane back. But we can move the coordinator report, yes.
Okay, all right, Elizabeth, coordinator's report.
This will be kind of a repeat of some of the things we have been talking about, just to go back over some of the reporting stuff. So as Mary mentioned, she made a wonderful reporting template, and that is attached. Grayson pointed out that it basically can't read it, but I also have it both here. So I think pull that up here. It goes, so you can walk through it here, if any of you have had a chance to look it over, and have any feedback on that. It's like plan is for the brand to using this, to do their reporting, and so Mary did this, as we mentioned, this has reported directly on those approved, uses and things, so that we are making sure that they're using those fundings or that funding for those uses of those in alignment with the way funding is supposed to be used. And so I don't know if anybody right off the bat has any comments or feedback on this or anything that jumps out that missing or anything.
So in green, you have the categories, and then below there are the questions, and where do they fill in the data for the questions? Down below that?
Yes.
Okay. Where it says grantee populate.
Yes.
Okay.
So we put more here, so I think this is an example, more here for them to fill in. And then here, this would be where they would fill stuff in. And so minor things here would be you could just like lock certain cells so they can't even touch things. Sometimes that can be an issue. People just start deleting things and then or entering things in the wrong places. So and like minor things like changing this. I mean, it is a drop-down menu, but it's not like super clear. Also, good to know. You obviously can't tell. But so that you can't just put random things in here because once you start trying, I don't know, if you look at things like data, like people spell things differently. You put an extra A in harm reduction, and then you're like trying to apply your data has become way more complicated than it needs to be. So minor things you can do to try to make it a little bit easier on the front end. But yeah, just block it so people can't accidentally do things or type where they need to be. But yeah, more I guess formatting than making sure we're collecting the data that we need or that we think would be useful. So.
And how often do they have to fill this in?
This would be quarterly. And it's due for about 30 days from the end of the quarter. 15 to 30, yeah, a couple of them have asked for 15 days.
I mean, I will definitely want to look a little closer. I started to look at it and didn't have a chance, but overall, like, I think it looks really great to be able to ask folks like who wrote a proposal that identified which thing you're doing and which strategy you're doing. And so I think it's great. The thought I have is that like after the first round of doing it, I know we have so many, but if we have time and we hire somebody to do it, we may want to look back at what people are doing and where are there times where their measures of success of different ones could actually be the same. Because I think you're gonna have people interpret their own work slightly differently, and then when you go but they could be categorized the same. So when you go to say, we supported treatment expansion for XYZ, like you might just want to be making sure that they're overlapping, so you're not reporting out. So we have the best way of reporting out our success, I guess, is what I think I'm saying. Because there are so many approved uses, like hundreds. And so if there are ones that like could be close and you say to them, would you be willing to say that this is that approved use? So that if you have 10 that are using one and one outlier that could be brought under that, those are small things and those are later. But just a thought I have from looking at how, I love the idea of letting them choose, but you may also want to sort of do a verification of that choice so that we can maximize how we report. Sorry, it took me a while to get to that.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. And that was actually a discussion we had during the contract development process, because some grantees, to their credit, listed 40 approved uses, and we weren't going to list that in the contract. So we had to consolidate essentially. And so what we will ask them to do is ensure that the approved uses that they're referencing in their reporting matches, I think we did up to 6, but not exceeding that.
Right.
And we try to pick the approved use that best encompassed or best aligned with their program. And I will say North Carolina has developed a list of progress measures for each of the approved uses that we will utilize, and we'll have a separate tab for them so that we can ask them to select for those for their approvals.
Awesome, that's so great.
For our sake and also for theirs, to make sure we can look at things across progress.
Yeah, awesome, great, thank you.
Any questions in regards to the form that you have that people will use for quarterly reporting?
I have a question for the council. We have 3 performance measures that we're gonna ask folks to select up to 3. Would the council like to see more than that? I spoke with other settlement administrators at the RX Summit, and up to 3 seemed to be a consensus around what folks were doing. Some were doing 2. Tennessee shared a very similar template, which this is what was that which I adapted this from. They only had 1 or 2, I believe. Again, given how many approved uses and sort of the wide range of our projects, I thought 3 would be more appropriate for us, but if anyone feels strongly that we change that number, we're happy to do that.
And you're saying up to 3.
Up to 3.
So if I'm a small organization, I can choose 1.
Yeah.
Again, if I, for some people, if they already have contracts and they're doing work and they can combine it with this, they can do that, but I'm thinking of smaller, so if you say up to 3. That. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, and again, for like, one of our contracts, it's $20,000. I would expect them to have 1.
Yeah.
For one, yeah.
Well, I'm
salary
thinking
request,
of,
but
I think, Maine pretrial,
another example.
yeah, they were a small contract.
But
I'm sure that they could give you more, because they've been at this for a long time, but again, they didn't get a lot of funding, so you don't wanna make them do a lot of, work for a little bit of funding. So, this way they have a choice of up to 3. And it'll be interesting to see the first ones come through, because there's a part of me that says, should we be mandating, like Liz was pointing out, is there something we want from everybody, one report, from them? But I think this first round, we look at it.
I actually don't want to mandate one, because I actually like them choosing.
Yeah.
It was more that like you may want to ask them to move it over so that they combine with
Yeah.
others. I actually appreciate that, like having them choose. As somebody who's grantee often of things.
Any questions, concerns?
People may need TA to do this.
Yeah.
Is that built in already? Did you build that into the very done or?
Yeah,
Okay.
that includes technical assistance.
Right.
And then something that Elizabeth will also provide support around, yeah.
Great.
The only thing that I would maybe recommend we add is, a section where we can ask them to, tell us what a success has been for them so far. I think we've got, we'll get good quantitative data from this, but having those narrative stories and more qualitative, I think is important. I know some other states have really emphasized that in their reporting. Something for us to consider. Maybe we don't do it every quarter, but
Yeah, I'm wondering if like on a 6-month basis, you also ask the question of like what are challenges you've had in implementing so that they can tell us if they haven't been able to do something or if they need additional support. And it could just be free response and they can put NA, but it gives people an option.
Right.
Excellent. Any other comments, questions? Concerns?
I also want to say that I think this is a good starting point for us. Certainly, this can be adapted and changed, but I think for a preliminary reporting template, this checks the boxes we need to. And it is approachable for all our and both parties. And our staff.
Thank you. Anything else to report?
I think the only other things on that were just, as Mary already mentioned, that timeline, to make sure we get this to them, in time for their first reports to be due. And so, we're also, I mentioned, we're working with the Maine CDC just to review, what they already collect, for the SSPs, just so we don't do anything duplicative. We know that we're not gonna be able to report on MRC specific things through the SSPs data, but they collect stuff through RedCap, and depending on how that conversation goes, it could be pretty easy for us to just get that reporting, and then we can just have those two encounters, exchanges, things like that, and all of the SSP data. They do that monthly, and so the people at the CDC are lovely, and they're hoping that we can just have direct access, but they've also offered to share it with us on a quarterly basis, or whenever we need it, so we have access to that, just because we're hoping, we don't want to duplicate efforts for the people reporting to have to send it to multiple people, or build our own report if this data is already being collected. So that's an ongoing conversation, but that would just be a separate report that those grantees would do. And that this would be FFC specific case. And then, as Mary mentioned, our goal is to have this finalized at the end of May, just so they have a month or so to review that before the quarter ends at the end of June. They have that 30 days to submit it, so just they have plenty of time to review and then submit it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the SSP contracts, as a reminder, goes on out in January. And we are relying right now on the provider sharing their CDC data with us. So what we're trying to do here is integrate the reporting we've already asked of them with this new template that we'll use moving forward. We won't ask them to complete it each quarter, but we're thinking we can ask them to do it twice a year. And again, each month we'll get on a more regular schedule with them to make sure we're receiving those reports. And that's really for us to just ensure that they're operating, they're doing the work that we're expecting them to, and then we'll be able to kind of look into their work a little bit deeper, and specifically how they're using MRC funds. Or excuse me, rescue. And if we need to, we can certainly ask them to move to our quarterly reporting. I don't think that's necessary.
Questions on timeline?
I'll also note that we talked at the Program Grants Committee and Finance Committee about trying to streamline our reporting schedule. So over the next 6 months, there may be times when things are a little bit off kilter, but we're going to try to align those moving forward. So that hopefully, by this time next year, we're asking grantees for reports on the same day across the board. That staff isn't trying to juggle, 3 different reporting deadlines all within months. And that came at the recommendation of the board of grants committee. Let's do that.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah.
All right, no questions. I will share with you, while I have a few moments. Oh, Ben is here, so good. I hope that you all had an opportunity, some of you to talk to Sarah, who's doing some reporting out on our evaluation process. And in the grant, and I believe she's coming to the June meeting.
Yes.
To
Yeah.
report out on what she has learned in speaking with people who received grant dollars, who did not receive grant dollars, and also council members and evaluators for the process. So it'll be interesting to see what she's learned. Ben, you're here. We're so happy you're here. I just want to make sure we have the time to do this. One of the things that Mary has requested, that we're talking about the RFP that's going out, that you're here during this discussion. So would you mind being able to have right now the discussion on the RFP? So we have your expertise while you're on screen.
Sure.
Great. Okay, so Mary?
Yes, so the RFP, which we talked about, 45 minutes ago. This was developed, from a state RFP as you can tell. Elizabeth helped draft this, and Ben and I actually spoke about this RFP back in October. And this was developed from a grant management service RFP that the state had put out. What we are looking for primarily is feedback in the areas that are highlighted in red. There's a couple of processes that the state goes through with these RFPs that I don't think we have the capacity for, nor do I recommend we do. Couple of things that I'll note. We have not developed an evaluation criteria for this RFP yet. And I don't know if that's something the council feels strongly we develop prior to publishing this. I think it's certainly reasonable for us to work on that evaluation rubric over the course of the next week and ask the finance committee on 16th for feedback. And then to have a final evaluation rubric ready for June. But I don't necessarily want to hold up publishing this RFP for that unless you all think otherwise.
So you all would have gotten this in your email, or if you're here, it's printed out. And Mary's been talking about section 5B that's in red. And it's the scoring weights and process. So you're asking us at this point, do we want one, this is the state's plan, when the state does it, or are you saying you don't want to include this and we develop our own plan, or just leave this section out?
I do think we need to develop our own plan, and I'm looking for input on whether or not we need to establish this scoring weight section prior to pushing it, or if the council is comfortable with us developing that evaluation rubric after it's published. And that's really, again, from a timeline perspective. I would say I've never applied for an RFP like this, and I can imagine that bidders may want to know what we're evaluating. It would just delay the process at this point. That's doable. So we just need a little bit of input from you all about moving forward.
So as someone who has written grants, I'll tell you the important part is, for me, when I wrote a grant, is to know where to put my emphasis.
Yeah, I would say that the scoring tells me what you care about most and what you're like really looking for, and without it, I would be a little lost on here. Like, there's so much you could say about what people do or what they're gonna do, and do you care more about what I'm gonna do? Do you care more about what I've done in the past, my qualifications? Like, I know, I hear you that it's gonna stall up. But I honestly have never written a grant that doesn't tell me how. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I've probably written 30 grants at this point, and I've never written one that doesn't tell me the points that I'm gonna get. So I feel like it would be unusual And I don't think we wanna be unusual in this one. You know what I mean? Like, I know, I hear you that you wanna spell it out, but. Yeah, let's be
Council's never
average.
done anything.
Let's be average on this one, like. But I would, as a council member, be totally fine with some other committee approving whatever this is to speed it up. Like, I don't feel like I need to see it again. I'd be happy for somebody other or to approve.
Okay.
If that makes it, does the two things.
You know, I think I think it puts the background around it a little bit, but that's okay, we can do that. I think I can bring something to the finance committee next Friday. For this section.
Is that okay with you, Ben, if we bring it to finance?
Yeah, I was gonna just
You may-
echo what Liz said. If I had my DHHS cap on only, the state takes a very strict approach to publishing RFPs, and if anything changes after the publication, we basically have to recall the publication and republish it, just so that there's fairness and no potential applicants are advantaged, even if there's seemingly no advantage even given during a change after publication. I don't think we need to necessarily follow that, but it is, I will call it best practice, or at least a practice that the state does just to ensure fairness among applicants. I don't think it could. I'm happy to, I have the deputy director on my contracting team can certainly help maybe talk through some things, Mary, with us or you. And I don't think it would necessarily delay publication that much. And although maybe you're talking just procedurally with the council, but happy to take that up at the finance meeting next Friday.
Thank you, that would be great, if I can meet with them.
Mary, I just want to point out that next Friday is the finance committee. It's also the Maine SUD conference in Sebasco that some members may be attending.
Thank you.
If we're there, we could break out, we can find a room to break out to the finance committee.
Maggie had also called out the proof of capacity.
Oh, Maggie,
Password, resumes, and stuff.
is Maggie with us?
Yeah, I'm back now. Sorry for that.
Would you like to comment on some of the things that you saw in reviewing the RFP?
Sure. So a few in the scoring matrix, we talk about organizational capacity and capacity to deliver. But in the prior areas where it describes the submissions that you need to give as a bidder, it doesn't actually clarify where you would put that information. And so I thought we need to be clear to bidders where they need to explain their organizational capacity. So that was one comment. I thought as well, it may be helpful for both bidders and reviewers if we put page or word limits into this to give a framework of what we're expecting. And forgive me if this was already discussed because I'm jumping in late. The other elements that I was curious about was two components on section C, part 4, around reporting findings to various council partners. It sounded like this was really giving the vendor the lead role on that. And I felt like that should be at the discretion of the executive director. So it's supporting the executive director who could delegate that, but that the executive director really decides who's communicating what about these grants. And so, the vendor would only communicate with the Office of the Attorney General about these specific grants if the executive director wanted them to, or Maine CDC or other state departments. So that was an additional comment. I think the last comment I had was around section D, organizational technical assistance. In part 3 of that, it talked around a lot of administrative components that I was confused the difference between what Elizabeth is doing and what this is doing, which that's fine if I'm confused, as long as the executive director isn't. But I wasn't clear on the kind of the distinction between the roles there, which again, maybe I don't need to be clear as long as the executive director is. So those were, I think, my 4 comments.
Maggie, where are you on that last comment? With the,
In the organizational technical assistance section, I think that's section D.
okay.
Between section D, part 3, and Elizabeth's work. Let me see if I can pull up a page number.
Yeah. A great call out, and that's something that I think Elizabeth and I will need to talk about to make sure she's on board with her role. And I'll make her review that and then adjust this section for it.
And I'll say like, agree to the page limits and to, adding in the organizational qualifications and experience section. Page limits. You'll want those. We'll want those. You'll get some that are 50 pages and you'll get some that are 10, and how do you evaluate them? Yeah, it's really hard.
Right. Do you have any recommendations on page limit?
I mean, I think more than 10 pages, like I think 20 pages is always egregious and way too much, and people say too much. I think 10, it depends on, I read what you wrote here. Sometimes, I guess maybe people have thoughts if 10 is enough.
I think 10 is enough.
But then be really clear what that means. Is it single spaced, it's double spaced, say that it's in this font, in this, and then with 1-inch margins or whatever it is you want. I would just be really clear about it. So that you get, again, this goes to like the fairness thing. It just like levels the playing field really quickly and easily, and it's not hard to follow. It isn't like egregious, it's totally normal.
Which again, when you limit the pages, if you have a clear, if they know the scoring matrix, they know where to concentrate on, because they'll know by the scoring matrix, what's the most important to us.
Yeah.
The 10 pages seems reasonable, more than sufficient, I think. Great. Any other comments on the RFP?
Yes, okay.
So here is my procedural comment. So you're asking today for us not to vote on this. You're asking today for the council to let the finance committee put the final touches on it before it goes out.
Yes.
From the recommendations that we had today, which are to look at the scoring matrix, to put in some information about the length of the pages, to define that role in that section.
Yeah, I'm looking to use the feedback from today to give permission from the council for the finance committee to approve it next week, once I've had a chance to go back and make changes. And we may need more time than that, but at least this gives us the ability for the finance committee to approve it and for us to stick with the schedule I proposed.
Do you need a motion for that?
I think so.
I'll make a motion for give permission to the finance committee for Mary to make changes and for the finance committee to give approval to the RFP.
For publication.
For publication. Great.
I was second that.
Thanks. So Liz was the first, Paul seconded. Other discussion? If Grayson, will you call roll?
Amber Pulsford,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Deb Poulin,
Yes.
Joe Everett. Yes. Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel,
Yes.
Tess Parks. Yeah, it's to allow the finance committee to amend or approve our top bracket.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. We were gonna go back to the finance report because Ben is now here to report on our finances. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Pat. Good afternoon, everyone. The Finance Committee meets the Friday a week after the council. So it's been 2 or 3 weeks since we met last, but unfortunately, I do not have a updated accounting of our finances from the finance official over at OAG, but it's the same. It's right around $34 million in our account, and the last report I have is from February, which included several payments that were made to Milestone and Maine General and Maine Health, among others. But there's certainly been other deposits and payments out of our account. I just don't have that reconciliation back from the OAG yet. To that point, in our finance committee, we discussed, and the finance committee was supportive of using funding from the Maine Recovery Council to support a position at the OAG to support finance, all the finances, basically, to sort of create a report and to timely provide updates. And help process contracts, things like that. I think that would go a long way. I think there was broad support at the Finance Committee to do that. It would be another contracted position at the OAG. I'll pause to see if anyone OAG or Mary had conversations with OAG about that in the intervening weeks. Not hearing any. If the council.
She has had some conversation.
Oh.
Hold on, she's just looking at her notes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay.
But as long as the council feels okay with that, I think the finance committee's recommendation would be to pursue that and try to bring someone on. I think it would be, like a mid-level position that would be embedded at the Office of the Attorney General to support with all of that work. I think it likely could be full-time, but I think it could be, half-time to, 20 to something between 20 and 40 hours. I don't see a reason not to bring it on as a full-time position to start with, at least.
We did talk to the AG's finance director about it, and she was going to look into it. Based on our initial conversation, it did not sound like a contracted position funded by the Maine Recovery Council, that individual would have enough access to internal systems for it to be worthwhile. Similar to sort of firewall that I have. We rely on Grayson for much of our insight. I can follow back up with her. But there was some hesitancy.
So for those who aren't understanding, one of the things is that if we just contracted a finance person to work with us, they wouldn't have access to our accounts within the Attorney General's office. And that's really important that the person is able to see where we're spending our money, where it's going, what's going, and so they have to have access. So somehow this position, if I'm saying it right, then please let me know if not, this position has to be able to get into those accounts. To be able to report back to us. And I will share with you, after being at this for 2.5 years now, one of the areas, and we're very grateful for Ben, is that we really need to keep our finances, better reporting of them to the council, to be able to say where we are, where it's going, and how, because we have expenses that are out there and we need to know what those are in a budget. And so hiring somebody, I think, with a financial background, we have a lot of money. And so you really need to have that monitored. But that's the tricky part. And I think we will continue to work with the AG's office, figure out how we can get past some of the firewalls. So a financial person would be able to have the access to our accounts.
I think it goes
I-
back to, we talked
Yep.
about with how state line, we need to add it to the budget. And
Well, there, we can do a financial order that the governor would sign off on to do that. I can try to, if that's what Summer or others think is needed, we can try to do that. It's essentially a temporary state line. And if that would allow access to what is needed over there to fulfill those responsibilities, I think we should still pursue that. So we will circle back with more information about that. I do think that would greatly benefit this body, though. In other areas that we covered at the Finance Committee was reporting and oversight. Stop me if you all talked about this previously, but we went through some various models of how involved this council should be with contract reporting and oversight of grants and contracts, and thought Elizabeth did a good job of laying out the options, which we were also considered at the Program and Grants Committee. Direct source it to a vendor, or have Maine Recovery Council having direct oversight, or option 3 being a hybrid model. We discussed this at length and thought that we had to rely on option 3, a hybrid model, in the interim here, but move towards a model of option 1, which would be having a vendor doing the direct management and oversight of the contracts, and then we can develop processes to make sure that all of the information is flowing up to the council, and treating, in an effort to try to keep the council acting like a board of directors, as opposed to digging into the operational work of what's going on. We talked about audits for a while, and I think some of the language that's included in some of the contracts we've encumbered are probably more restrictive than what is necessary, but it was general consensus that we wanted to make sure that we retained audit ability and to pull access data when we needed them. I think that's under process. And we talked on the vendor support contract and the RFP for a while. Happy to answer any questions about finance related matters.
Any questions on the finance, Paul?
Under the audit spend, we were not sure about what was the level of funding that would trigger an audit per Maine accounting practices. Do you have that number?
I don't. I think I'll need to work with Brendan on that. There's different levels for federal funds versus state funds. I think I don't know if there's anything in the agreements that were signed. I think we could just follow state policy. And state policy right now is $500,000. If you get more than $100,000, I believe, or less than $500,000, you need to do a CPA basically needs to review your books. You get more than $500,000, you need to do a full audit, full financial audit. We want to make sure that those thresholds are accurate, and that the funding that the Maine Recovery Council is giving out would be applicable for those same thresholds.
And I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting, but where did we come down on, maybe it goes back to the discussion you had with the AG's office about a staff person on like a monthly report for us on where we're at. I know we talked about it at the last finance committee meeting I was at, which was probably 2 meetings ago.
Yeah, I think that we need more support and capacity to develop some reports and make sure that we are getting frequent updates on financial matters. And I think that is the ongoing conversation with the AG about hiring someone to do that. I do think I would strongly recommend just embedding them at the OAG's shop, so that they can access the databases and other systems that they would need to. I think it would reassure the OAG doing that, but I think that is going to be critical to building some of the stuff out.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We should have fun, and that's the goal we're aiming at, but as we've learned, nothing is ever easy. Chastity.
I don't know that this question's right, but if we're able to do that and embed someone there, when the administration changes and it could go the other way, would we lose any of our control in that with having someone working for the AG instead of working for us? Like, would any of that change?
My guess is if we give the AG's money to hire somebody, we don't have a say, I don't believe, in who they hire.
But we can terminate the contract.
Yeah.
But we can terminate the contract. If we have a contract with the AG's office to do that,
They also.
yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right to bring that. I mean, again, it is a real concern of this council is that we are at the mercy of when life changes in Augusta. Our lives could change, although we are independent. We are, but we're not, so that and we're ahead of the game when we think about it. And we know that it could happen. But yeah, I mean, it is a risk. It'll be tricky as to how you do that. Put somebody, embed them in the office. At the same time, what control do we have?
I will say we were able to change the contract language for our grantees so that the AG's office can terminate their contracts. Or they can bring on something.
Yeah, I mean, just my 2 cents on that. I think it's a good point. I think what we would do, it takes a bit of work to transfer money between organizations or departments in the state, but that's almost universally done with the money transfer is not that hard, but we would want to put in place an MOU between the Maine Recovery Council and the Office of the Attorney General on the terms of that. We can just build out that MOU that we have joint hiring authority, or that both people sit on the hiring committee and we'll come to consensus on whoever we hire, and we'll, so I think we can build in some of those terms into the agreement. It's another piece of paper that we would need to do, but that would be the pretty standard practice for that.
But Courtney, you raise again the point around protecting the future. Sorry, Brenda. Chat, it's just about protecting the future of the council.
Yeah.
Like it needs to be a bipartisan entity. Like we have great partners with the AG's office, and I think we just need to make sure it stays that way.
Correct.
Sorry.
I'm substitute Courtney for a lot of.
It's the same thing.
Any other financial questions? Well, if there's no other financial questions, I think that Ben would like to share some news with the council.
I don't like making things about me, but just I wanted to let you all know that I have given my resignation in my position as Deputy Commissioner of Finance. My last day will be May 29th of this month. So with my end of my state service, will be ending my appointment on this council as well. So I am here today remotely, unfortunately, and I'll run the finance committee next Friday, but then this will be my last final council meeting. It's been a privilege serving with all of you on this and getting it stood up. I think startups in the public sector are really difficult, but I think we've done an admirable job here in challenging circumstances, but I could continue on, but I won't. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
We'll miss you, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you
We'll
for
miss you.
everything.
Greatly.
Thank you, Ben, for everything.
We will miss you
We will
greatly.
miss you, Ben, in so many ways,
Thank you, Ben.
in our day jobs too.
Not just the council, we're gonna tell you. Then I don't know if you were here, but literally, we wrote contracts of $14 million. We have them done and whatever, and you certainly were a significant part of getting, and well how hard that was to do. wasn't easy. You will be greatly missed. As the person who really understands the state finances, where the rest of us just sort of have our heads spin. We will miss you, and hopefully the governor, because you are a governor appointee, will appoint somebody that has your expertise. But we wish you well, and whatever it is that you do, I'm sure you'll do it well, but thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. New business. Do we have new business?
I have one piece of new business, yes. So the last thing in your packet, there is a resume included. And I received an email not too long ago. From an individual, Tucker. Hey, great. Who is interested in an internship opportunity with the council. You all may recognize that name because Tucker interned with Gordon last summer and joined some of our council meetings. We don't have a formal internship opportunity. I did have an interview with him to learn a little bit more about his interests and, broadly speaking, and also with the council. It sounds like he's interested in helping us shape what an internship could look like with the council. I will say, I think having an intern for the Maine Recovery Council at some point is a wonderful opportunity. I think the settlement funds are so unique, and this is a short-lived opportunity that for a young person who's interested in economics, public policy, political science, to have exposure to our work would be a really valuable experience. And I know there's plenty of work to go around, and I can list 5 to 10 things that Tucker could do tomorrow if he interned with us. I will say logistically, I don't know if it would be possible for us to contract with him as an intern this summer. That's something that I would have to talk to the Attorney General's office about. But I wanted to share his resume with you all, let you know that if an internship experience is something you're interested in, I would fully support it. I think Tucker would be great. And while I'm still here in July, could help oversee the internship experience to some extent. I think it would probably be very focused on, going to policy meetings that are happening around the state, doing research around what other states are doing with their settlement funds, similar to the role that Ella was able to play with us when she was working for the Attorney General's office. Again, there won't be we won't be short of experiences for an intern this summer or in future summers, but this is a really bad situation.
Would this be a paid internship, right?
Tucker is looking for a paid internship. I think a paid internship is a fair process, especially if we're asking someone to do this work.
I think that would make it more sustainable.
Most definitely, and I think we have the funds for it. I think 20 to 25 an hour would be reasonable. Right now, those plans.
I love having, I think interns are great. I think it's great to have them. We are pretty strong that we in our organization, and I might suggest it here, that if it's a paid internship, that it has to be an open call. His interest is awesome and he can be in it, but it should be an open call, open to other folks, because it is such a unique opportunity.
Yeah.
And something that's so cool. And I think there are probably a lot of people who might want to do it. So that's my only caveat. Great.
Yeah, open and transparent.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Love the idea, but.
And yes, do it. It's awesome to do. Great opportunity.
I do also think the timing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the timing is a little hard to bring anyone on, although they are gonna do work, the timing is, and I think that we need to develop a procedure as to how we do it, but I think there's a consensus that we're very interested in doing it and having a student intern. Considering I started as a student intern with Wellspring and ended up as their executive director. So I love internships, so I think it's a great opportunity. But I don't think we're able to do it this summer. Unless others feel differently, I just don't think can see it.
We want an open
The
process.
AG's office wants to take.
Correct, I mean, they, exactly, the AGs and the assignment to us will put in work, but at this point, I think. We have enough on our plate. And I do think it should be open though. Yeah. All right, anything else? So,
Not for my.
okay, I am actually gonna look at a clock. And I think this is a first, I just wanna say this. I wanna say it is 3:46. I don't think in the history of the 2.5 years we've been doing it, we have ever ended a meeting. Very rarely on time, but if you don't have any other business before this board. And as a grandmother, I can tell you how happy I am, because my grandson's playing in his championship college game. And I'm gonna be able to make maybe the couple final inning. Excellent. But if there's no other business before this council, I am gonna call it adjourned. I would thank you all very much. Travel safe going home. We'll see you next month. And also in committee meetings, but thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ramble.